We live in a time of super abundant capital, and the new scarce resource that everybody's looking for is actually right in this room. It's you. That's right, it's you. Sitting here, having spent your money to buy a ticket, having spent your Saturday listening to workshops. You, talent on a journey to growth, are the new scarce resource. How would you stop soldiers from entering your house at night? Feeling a steel blade on your throat as their spit hits your face. And from the corner of your eye, you see them dragging your dearest ones by their feet through the room, down the stairs. And every time a head crashes onto a step, you can hear their terror. You might feel nightmarish, sitting, visualizing this, hearing what that little Syrian boy told me. He had come all the way from his country that's laying in ruins to my native Austria in Europe. And he had chosen a new name, Paul, because he wanted to show that he will integrate. In fact, he told me he didn't only want to integrate, he wanted to become an entrepreneur. Because in his experience, wars were always fought for resources. And entrepreneurs were the people who create value through their work, and that'll give them wealth. And it was always the absence of wealth that would lead to war. This little Syrian Paul reminded me a lot of another Paul from US America. That Paul was tall, slender in his figure, with brown hair. But he had a difficult story himself. When he was a baby, he was put up for adoption, given away. He later dropped out of school, lived in a poor country, didn't eat meat. He started a company, and then he was fired by his partners. The life of that Paul was in danger at that point, because he was feeling that nobody in this world was actually having the impression that his life meant something. He was worthless to everybody. That was his appreciation. Until he came up with one simple fact that he discovered. And that is, everything around you that you call life was made up by people who are no smarter than you. Once he discovered that simple fact, he was able to change everything and rewrite all the rules. And rules are being rewritten in this day. We heard that competition is surging, and if you don't have a calling to follow in this century, you might not have a job quite soon, as automation is progressing and more people enter this planet. Because you're not the only one trying to get that scholarship. You're not the only one trying to go to Harvard. You're not the only one trying to serve that market. You're not the only one who's applying for the job. It's great that you're here, Because fighting for your purpose in life, as any fight, is not won in the theater of the arena. It's won in the thousands of hours in the training room, in the classroom, in the conference on a weekend, where you spend your money and time to grow. Disruption is everywhere around us. It touches all aspects of our lives. So let me just give you 3 leadership principles. I will tell you how the new flows of digitally global goods, services, people, finance, and data change the world. How valuepreneurs will own this century, and how you can use all of that to live a life in peace and prosperity. Disruption doesn't stop in the corporate world. If you owned a taxi company back 10 years, you were fine. Away with you once Uber came. They pulled out the carpet underneath your feet. Your business model fell apart overnight. You got disrupted. You might have been very successful in the past, but your victory, in fact, defeated you. Your success has made you weak. You have grown as a result of your success. You've grown tired. You are unwilling to change. And the speed of disruption ever increases. Because here in Malaysia, in the first weeks of Uber's existence, 2 Harvard graduates founded GrabCar, which all of you are using, I suppose. And the same is true for Indonesia, and the same is true for the US and China and everywhere. So how do you succeed in that fast-changing environment? It doesn't stop there. Look at politics. Hosni Mubarak, president of Egypt, had to resign a couple of years back in the Arab Spring through a rebel that started and was mainly carried through on social media, something that had not been there just a couple of years earlier. And in this day, even religions that were there for millennia are losing ground, and people run for all types of sects, even online sects, in dresses that you wouldn't recognize them in, such as the Bitcoin bubble. You live in a time that's unique because for the first time in 5,000 years, interest rates have dropped below 0. If you're hoarding money, you're losing money. Figure that. And it will stay that way for quite a long time because governments from California to Japan have taken on so much debt that they could not afford to pay you any interest on top of that. So they will not be able to raise interest rates. And they're financing themselves through the money press, which means that money, for the first time in human history, is abundant. We live in a time of super abundant capital. And the new scarce resource that everybody's looking for is actually right in this room. It's you. That's right, it's you. Sitting here, having spent your money to buy a ticket, having spent your Saturday listening to workshops. You, talent on a journey to growth, are the new scarce resource, and you will be looking to make a good deal. So let me tell you how valuepreneurs will rule this century, will own it, in fact. Valuepreneurs are people who, above everything else, focus on that thing, value. You might call it purpose. Business people might call it money. Government leaders might call it improvement. Value. In a long-term perspective. In fact, when I talk about value, most people would think about shareholder value, because that's what's been done at Wall Street for the past 30 years. But that's been done away with quite recently, because you cannot sustain that position anymore, and because from all over the world, from China to Chile, you have businesses owned either by families or by governments and not a public shareholder. And those businesses look for a long-term strategy. Now, coming back to Paul, the tall Paul, he eventually got his company right. He went to the stock market in 1980. He went public. But he did a very different thing from what most people thought how you would have to do it. He didn't ever pay any dividend to anybody. He didn't share any of his profit with his shareholders, believing that if that money would be reinvested, the company would grow in value in such a way that none of them could experience any way otherwise. And he was right. If you were an initial investor in 1980, by now you have made your investment 300 times over. Not double, not triple, not quadruple, 300x. Because he was rigorously focusing on value. He was sticking to a clear strategy of having a globally distributed product that was very closed, different from all the other products out there in his industry. And he went on, and he was able to inspire people for his vision. He was able to keep his shareholders aboard because he was convincing them that his strategy, his valuepreneurial strategy, would actually attract both investment and talent in unprecedented ways. So if you're looking for a job these days, I think one of the most important things to look for is whether an organization is growing. Because growth creates opportunity. Growth means that there's going to be new roles to be taken on, new responsibilities to be had, and that young people like you can actually make a difference right out off the bat. Remember Paul again? Paul is his middle name. His first name is Stephen, or Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs. He created Apple, which is now the most valuable business on earth, valued at about $900 billion US. That's how much value Steve created. He also created the home computer, the smartphone, the tablet, Pixar animation studios that changed the movie industry forever, iTunes that changed the music industry forever, and the App Store that changed the software industry forever. Steve Jobs died in 2011, but his legacy lives on. I doubt any here does not have a smartphone, and we're actually being referenced to by that technology. We're generation smartphone after all, right? And that is a global phenomenon. That is actually, I think, more change than many government leaders around the world have achieved, because they're bound to their territory for the most part. So, thinking back, even beyond the 1980s, think back maybe 1,000 years. 1,000 years ago, there was a man and a woman standing somewhere on this earth, their hands joined, and out of pure love, they gave life to a child. And that child to a child of its own. And another child later. All the way down through the centuries. All the way down to you. And those children have overcome everything along that way. For 1,000 years, for your right to exist. You have the blood of champions pulsing through your veins. They made it through antiquity, the Dark Ages, Enlightenment, the Age of Exploration, through wars, crusades, famines, droughts, plague, pestilence, and persecution, and they persevered, all the way down to you. So I want to applaud you. I want to applaud you for being here. I want to applaud you for taking this chance to look out for your own value in life and in this world. I want to applaud you, because actually that is what life is about. Stretching and challenging yourselves, looking for ways that we can improve. Malaysia, Asia, people from around the world, if you're with me on this, if you share in the same vision that I do, if you feel the same passion that I do, if you hear the same beating drum and get the same impression of necessity and urgency that I do, then I'm convinced that this will be a bright century for all of us, east and west, north and south. And we will fly to Mars with Elon Musk, and nobody will ever dare to doubt the value of you, because you have been here to make this world a better place. Thank you for being here, everybody.